Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday morning. This is a First Friday brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle, in specific the Town Government Committee. And we are extremely grateful that you're taking your time to spend with us this morning on a topic that is of importance to so many of us, which is affordable housing. The order, and this is being recorded, the order of things will be that Stefan Bader, who is on the Concord Housing Development Corporation committee, it's
Housing Authority.
Housing. I knew that, Stefan, all these acronyms. Anyway, Stefan Bader is going to moderate this conversation, and we have the privilege of having him do that, and then Keith Berkman and Marcia Rasmussen to join us in this conversation. So I'm going to turn this over to Stefan. Before I do, please remember to keep yourself muted during the program, because otherwise we won't get echoes. And secondly, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, because Carlin Reed, who is a pro at this, Carlin Reed will be watching the chat box. And when all of the presentations are over, she will be able to help ask the questions that are on your mind. There's also the possibility at the end of the program for you all to raise your hand and speak directly by pushing on the bottom usually of your computer screen, something called reactions. And that there's a raise your hand icon. So I'm doing that right now, and that shows I've raised my hand, and that will allow me to speak. When I'm completed, I politely lower my hand. So raise your hand, lower your hand is one of the ways of making sure that your voice is heard. So chat box or raise your hand and lower your hand, all at the conclusion of Marcia Rasmussen's conversation. So take it away, Stefan Bader, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning, everyone. I am on the board of the Concord Housing Authority, although I am not functioning in that role today. Today, I am participating as a member of the board of the Concord Carlisle League of Women Voters. With that clarification underway, welcome. And it's my privilege to introduce Keith Bergman, our first speaker this morning. Keith is the current chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. He has, which is the board, the organization that handles affordable housing funding in Concord as a result of town meeting votes recently, along with 3 other people on his board. Keith was a former town manager in Littleton and Provincetown, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Keith. And also Nantucket, or you're involved in housing on Nantucket as well. And so he brings a variety of experience from around the Commonwealth, which I think all of which is relevant to Concord. He's obviously a Concord resident. And Keith, I invite you to take it away and give us a little bit of recent background history for anyone who has not been following this as close as some of us have.
Thanks very much, Stefan, and thanks to the League for inviting me to First Friday. It's my first Friday. So last week it was Thursday that I was at a League event, and I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see, and there we go. Are we starting yet? I gotta move this out of the way. I am not having any luck.
There we go.
Here I am. Okay, I was not having any luck at all sharing my screen. And that should have been the easy part. So anyway, thanks again. I'm Keith Bergman, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. I also represent the town of Concord on the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, where I'm a past president. I was very delighted to be a part of the League's DEI committee event last Thursday, where we looked at our communities through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, focusing on land use, zoning, and housing. And just to look back at that event, here again is my recommended reading list for DEI, which I shared at the time. It was great to be on a panel with Lily Geismer, who wrote Don't Blame Us, which had talked about Concord. Other books that I'd recommend: Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law, The Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America, and anything written by Ibram X. Kendi. And I just wanted to give a quick, I'm just going to quote from one of those, and it's from Rothstein's The Color of Law, where he found that until the last quarter of the 20th century, the racially explicit policies of federal, state, and local governments defined where whites and Africans Americans should live. Today's racial segregation in the North, South, Midwest, and West is not the unintended consequence of individual choices and of otherwise well-meaning law and regulation, but of unhidden public policy that explicitly segregated every metropolitan area in the United States. And why I introduce that is because I want to point to two things that Concord is doing that I think is very forward looking, and that I'm very excited about this year. And that to their credit, the Concord Select Board has adopted two goals this year to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of which is the establishment of a DEI commission, and I'm very excited about their work. But the other, which you'll hear more about from Marcia Rasmussen, is in updating the town's housing production plan. The Select Board is looking to maximize the equity and diversity impacts of future affordable housing initiatives. And I'm very pleased to see that there, and I hope that we can take maximum advantage of it. The housing production plan, as Marcia will tell us, is coming up for another public forum soon, November 15th at 7 p.m. on Zoom, and hope that you can all participate in that. In looking backwards, though, for me, my Concord housing history goes back to 2019, not all that far, but back in 2017, Concord's town meeting had established an affordable housing funding committee, which reported back 2 years later that Concord needs predictable, sustainable revenue sources so that funds are readily available when affordable opportunities arise. Much of the development of affordable homes is opportunistic, occurring when a suitable property becomes available, and without the necessary funds to act quickly, valuable opportunities could be missed. Words to live by. And the measures that that committee brought to town meeting in 2019, they were all passed. It was a package, a very important moment in our history, and it included establishing and funding the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, the committee that I chair. In 2019, town meeting accepted the authorizing state statute. A year later, adopted a bylaw that was drafted by a committee that I had chaired to help the select board bring a bylaw forward. And importantly, in 2019, 2 home rule petitions were filed by the town to fund an affordable housing trust. One is a real estate transfer fee. The other is a building permit surcharge. The Housing Funding Committee had estimated that those would raise about $2.6 million a year. While both have been reported out favorably in the last two sessions of the legislature, it's not become law yet. And so the trust has asked, and the select board has placed on the warrant for the January 19th, 2023 special town meeting, 2 articles to refile those home rule petitions for the new legislative session. And so we want to commend that to all of you. Also in 2019, for the first time, town meeting approved interim funding for the trust with $500,000 a year. And in the last several years, that a like amount has been appropriated. So we've, along with a donation to the trust fund, we've had a total of $2,025,000 available for projects. And this is just a brief summary of how those funds have been spent. I'd want to say that our top priority this past year has been Christopher Heights at Junction Village, where it had been our hope to bring 83 affordable units online and countable on the town's subsidized housing inventory. Our second priority, though, is the Assabet River Bluff project, which would be for 5 affordable units. We committed a significant amount of funds towards the acquisition of the 1 acre of Assabet River Bluff, which will be used for housing. And we have an uncommitted balance right now of just over $1 million with which we could help that project go forward. And so we're happy to be part of Concord's affordable housing team. We're the new kid on the block. Stefan's group is the one that's been here the longest. We've had a housing authority since 1961. Other entities that are listed here, we're happy to be on this group. And for those of you who are on the call, who are registered to vote in Concord, you're also members of Concord's affordable housing team, because you get to vote at town meeting, which is where we go for major funding. It's where we've gone for, and we'll go again for filing home rule petitions, for funding sources, and we're happy to be part of solving the affordable housing crisis in Concord. So thanks very much. And let me see how to stop share. All right. There we go.
Thank you, Keith. That's a great description of the landscape. And I will take this opportunity to remind people that if you have not voted yet, as you have until Tuesday to vote in the state election. And you'll have an opportunity in January again. This sounds like a broken record. I think probably most everyone has voted or made a plan to vote. Thank you for that presentation. The next speaker this morning is Marcia Rasmussen. Marcia is the Director of Planning and Land Management in Concord and has been for I don't know how many years, and maybe you don't want to say, but it's been a while. So she has been through a lot of these cycles of housing interest and housing production, housing non-production, as the case may be. Marcia is leading the organization of the town and the town's efforts in housing in many directions, including currently the housing production plan update. Our last housing production plan was in 2015. And Marcia, without further ado, I will turn things over to you. I think everyone knows you, and if they don't, they should. So thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. I have worked for the town since 1986, so it's going on 36 years. I think today is actually my anniversary day. So, and it has been a pleasure working in this community. My understanding, or what I thought I had been asked to talk about, was why submit a housing production plan, have a look back at 2015, what was accomplished, and or what was not accomplished and why, and what will be different in the 2022 housing production plan. So why submit a housing production plan? We want to do that because it's a way of taking a look at what our current housing needs might be, and then projecting how we want to begin to address them. So we look at, are there enough starter homes for new households? Is there an adequate number of workforce housing available? What options might we have for our empty nesters? And many people have expressed a desire to remain in the community. How are the needs of the elderly or the frail elderly being met? And what options might there be for people with physical or mental disabilities? And are we providing enough rental and home ownership opportunities for people? So we begin with a needs assessment using census data that's available. And part of the reason that this year's housing production plan was delayed is we were hoping that the 2020 census information would become available for us to utilize. That hasn't happened yet. We're not expecting it to be available until May of 2023. So we're moving forward because we know that this is an important endeavor to be done. So looking back at 2015, there were 8 different goals and 14 strategies identified. And so I'm going to briefly run through what those goals were, and then the strategies and what we've done to either achieve or at least attempt to meet those. Goal 1 was to support and foster aging in the community through the expansion of a range of options. Goal 2, increase the variety of housing options, particularly near village centers. Goal 3, encourage creation of affordable rental and ownership housing for households with low income, moderate, and middle incomes throughout the community. That's a scattered site approach rather than all in one location. Goal 4, encourage the preservation of existing smaller homes and construction of new smaller homes, especially as permanently affordable for low-income families. Goal 5, promotes and support affordable housing for families, including rental and home ownership. Goal 6, foster community outreach and education to develop an inclusive mindset about the need for affordable housing throughout the community. Goal 7, continue to nurture and maintain working partnerships with organizations focused on addressing affordable housing needs. And goal 8, continue to support the monitoring and preservation of existing affordable units. So how did we achieve all that, or did we achieve all that? And if not, why not? So there were 14 strategies identified. And it was interesting to go back and look at what had been identified and what we have achieved and what we're still working on, and then some of the things that failed. So our first strategy was to strengthen the accessory apartment bylaw. And there have been 2 zoning bylaw amendments proposed and approved by annual town meetings by the planning board back in 2020 and recently in 2022. Amending dimensional provisions to address the tear downs. And this has been a challenging one. A zoning bylaw amendment was approved in 2019. However, it hasn't had the effect or achieved the desired goal of trying to limit the loss of our smaller homes and then the mansionization, if you will, of resulting mansionization of and creation of larger homes. The third strategy was to create neighborhood conservation districts, and this has been a strategy that has been identified in the past. Whenever we have gone into neighborhoods where we think that it might be valuable to implement, there has been pushback from the neighborhood. They don't want to be the only one to have a neighborhood conservation district. They don't want to rely on their neighbors to weigh in on what their plans are for changing their structures or their homes. And so it has not moved forward. And I don't know if it's a viable strategy for preserving our existing housing stock. So further consideration may need to be given if that's going to be a strategy that's identified. The fourth strategy was to strengthen the demolition delay bylaw, and it's now a demolition review bylaw. And this has been done. It was accomplished in at annual town meeting 2021. We increased the delay from 6 months to 1 year. And we've included all properties that are older, that are 50 years or older. So it's a sliding number, and the Historical Commission, who's responsible for reviewing these properties, has been inundated with the number of applications. And so they are going out now maybe once or twice a month, sometimes more frequently, to address developers who are interested in tearing down an existing structure and then rebuilding something bigger and newer. So that's been successful, but we again are having to look at the delay aspect of it, and how do we identify or quantify what we're able to achieve there is an ongoing issue because of the numbers that are being requested. Strategy 5 was to encourage redevelopment at the Thoreau Depot area. And many of you who may have attended this year's town meeting know that this was a rather challenging proposal by the planning board. They had spent over 2 years in developing some goals and concepts that would change the nature of the Thoreau Business District. And they brought that to town meeting. And there was a significant pushback by a nearby neighborhood and area and the neighborhoods around this district, so that it failed at town meeting. So that the planning board has decided not to pursue any of that zoning for this next annual town meeting, and we'll be waiting to hear what is in the housing production plan before they may take elements of what was proposed previously, or they may bring the whole project back. I don't know yet. Strategy 6 was to consider adopting a natural resource protection zoning. This has not, and to look at allowing co-housing. These are two areas that we did not pursue. There were a lot of other things going on at the time during these past 6-7 years since the last plan. The natural resource protection zoning is something that I think DEP, or the Department of Housing and Community Development, have put forward. We have to look at it and see how it might apply to Concord's program of housing. And co-housing is another type of housing. It's where you develop smaller homes, but you have a community space where you can gather together, and it's more a supportive community. It's a little more challenging. It doesn't really address our affordable housing goals, but it might offer alternative options for different types of housing or lifestyle choices. So not included in the housing production plan, but I think are worthy of note, is that put forward by the planning board and approved at the 2021 and 2020 annual town meetings is the 2-family or additional dwelling unit in residence C, and that is by special permit, the 2-family option. There have been some developers who have pursued it, and we're excited to hear that people are interested in expanding this opportunity to a larger number of zoning districts. We have 4 residential zoning districts that range in size from 10,000 square feet to 80,000 square feet. And the 10,000 square foot lot areas are in our village centers and around the various train depots that we have, and then spread out along the Route 62 corridor. And then in between these more densely developed areas are the Residence B, which are 20,000 square foot areas. And then outside of that are 40,000 square foot, which is Residence A, and beyond that are the 80,000 or two builder acres. That is sort of our hinterlands, and some of the thinking about that is our sewer capacity issues. The sewer, only a third of the town is covered by or is served by municipal sewer service. Other properties outside of this area are have to have their own on-site septic system. So given our soil conditions and everything, the larger lots help support that on-site septic. The second thing that was not included in the housing production plan from 2015 was the acquisition of the Assabet River Bluff land and 406 Old Marlborough Road. And that was a really exciting opportunity because we were able to work together with those who were interested in open space preservation. And I think it was a great community effort, and we're delighted to have it move forward. Also excited to see how the housing will be developed over time at that location. Then there were local initiative strategies, and there are the remaining strategies 7 through 14 talk about what local initiatives we could implement. So create units on existing Concord Housing Authority properties, and this was specific for the Peter Bulkley building. There were 4 units that we were unable to construct in the prior renovation of that facility, and so funding was identified, and the 4 units were built since 2015. Then creating affordable assisted living units at Junction Village. That was the land was identified in 2010. The state declared it surplus, and then Concord Housing Development Corporation took ownership in 2013. They issued a request for proposals, and there were 12 responses. And the response that was most favorable to the residents in that immediate area was the 83-unit assisted living project. At the time, it had select board support, and they moved forward with design plans, and a comprehensive permit was approved in 2017. But funding issues post-COVID and the loss of select board support for the project derailed the project. The developer has decided not to move forward. Strategy number 9 was to create new Concord Housing Authority units at Everett Garden. This has been discussed and considered, but was determined to be not viable. There's not sufficient land area available to add any units at that location. Strategy 10 was to establish a buy-down program, and we've been able to do this. A buy-down program would be providing funds if you have a moderately affordable property unit and want to make it qualify as a subsidized for the subsidized housing inventory. You might contribute some additional funds to make it more affordable for somebody who is earning 80% or below the area median income. So we've been able to achieve this in 3 different locations. One was Ingham Lane, where new construction, additional funds were provided to create that more affordable unit. Elmbrook Lane, which was an existing affordable development done late 1990s, I believe, early 2000, and actually 2002, I think was when they took were finally able to move into that location. So there have been a couple at Elmbrook Lane where we've been able to reduce or make it more affordable, 2 of the units, and then Emerson Annex, which is one of the older developments that I was involved in back in 1987. That is a mix of affordability, and we were again able to buy down the unit so that it remained affordable for a new homeowner. Number 11 was to continue to host and support membership in the Regional Housing Services Office. the regional, the RHSO provides invaluable service to the Concord community. And we are really grateful to have their support and their expertise as it comes to housing issues. Continue participation in the West Metro Home Consortium. This provides the town with access to pooled funds that are provided by HUD. They support renovations to two of the projects that we were able to access were for the Concord Housing Authority to renovate kitchens and bathrooms in units in FY16, and construction of the 4 units at the Peter Bulkley in FY17. So the town has benefited from our participation in the Home Consortium. Strategy 13 was to support the Concord Housing Development Corporation in preserving existing affordable units. So I mentioned those with the buy down program. That's one of the things that we've been able to achieve. And then foster outreach and education about local and regional affordable housing needs. The RHSO, working with the Home Consortium, does provide fair housing training and study as part of that program. And then it was included in the comprehensive plan, the 2018 Envision Concord Bridge to 2030 plan that was prepared. So that is a synopsis of the elements that were in the 2015 housing production plan. And some of these will be brought forward as we develop the next housing production plan. So what will be different? I think that's going to be kind of exciting. We do expect to have a draft document available for public review next week in advance of the next forum, which is on November 15th. And then we'll be accepting public comments through the end of the month, and then providing a final penultimate, almost final document for the planning board and the select board at their meetings, I think December 12th and 13th. And we're hoping that that will then be approved by both the planning board and the select board, so it can be submitted to the Department of Housing Community Development. So what will be different? Well, currently there are over 30 strategies, and we're trying to winnow that down from looking at 2015, where we only had 14, and we were able to achieve many of them, but some of them failed. I'm a little concerned now that we have over 30, but I think we'll plow forward. We will be identifying specific zoning districts or geographic areas for affordable housing, identifying specific sites where comprehensive permits might be welcomed. We need to have characteristics of preferred development options. We need to identify municipally owned parcels where affordable housing might be suitable. And we need to continue collaboration with our regional housing development options. So those are some of the things that you should look forward to in the next plan. And that wraps up my part of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Marcia. I appreciate that. I think there's new tidbits in that summary for everyone on this call, including me. Thank you. Our next speaker is Diane Proctor, and I apologize, Diane, for getting you out of order, but I think actually it fits in here as well. Diane is currently the chair of the Concord Community Preservation Committee, which handles funds raised by the Community Preservation Act tax surcharge on our real estate tax bills. Diane has been a past president of the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle, and she has been an active, involved citizen of Concord for a very long time. Diane, I turn it over to you to bring us up to date on how the CPC fits into this affordable housing puzzle in Concord.
Thank you, Stefan, so much. And don't worry about order. That's irrelevant. The reason for speaking this morning is that you will find on the warrant for the special town meeting a petition from the CPC to ask that $1,044,255.78 of money that have been sitting right now, designated essentially for the Junction Village project, been sitting in abeyance, awaiting that project. Those monies were variously voted by the town and by the CPC in 2015, 2017, 2018, and then again in 2019. The latter three being about $350,000 each. So it's clear that that's not going forward. So we don't want that money to just sit. So we have a warrant petition requesting that that money be moved to our affordable housing reserve of the CPC. Then in the regular town meeting, we will request that that money, which we've moved in the special town meeting, will then be moved, the $1,044,255.78 be moved to the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund for distribution. So this will get that $1 million out and ready for people's use. And we're looking forward to that because we need affordable housing, and we need to make sure that there's the funds are not just sitting idly. So thank you, Stefan. That's the end of my report. But please support that warrant article.
Again, special town meeting, you will be receiving more notification about that from not only the town clerk's office, but also from the Concord Bridge, which everyone gets delivered to their mailbox now. Hallelujah on that front. So the warrant article that Diane just discussed is similar to the slide that Keith showed, where they had allocated 1 million to the Christopher Heights Junction Village project, and then reversed that when it was clear that it wasn't going forward. And this is the CPC doing the same thing with their piece of the funding. And that's, I think, a good point to stress that funding any affordable housing project takes funds, requires funding from a variety of sources, from the state allocating low-income housing tax credits to local organizations like the Concord Housing Foundation doing local fundraising for their efforts. There is no silver bullet for any of this. There is no pot of gold to get all of your funding in one place. It just doesn't work that way, I'm afraid.
And it also takes time. I mean,
and it takes time.
And doesn't mean it's going to automatically, like magic mushrooms, pop up affordable housing. It requires a lot of work. So thank you, Stefan. And for all the work that you do, we are so grateful.
I had a train commuter rail going by. I don't live in the MBTA commuter zone, but I'm awfully close to it. Okay. We want to open this up to questions. We have, looks like we have questions in the chat. We may have people, I can't see everybody, so I can't see who is raising their hand or not raising their hand, but we have a few questions in the chat, and Carlin is going to help us with filtering out questions in the chat, and we'll decide who to direct those questions to, and I'll jump in when I think it's appropriate. Carlin, do you want to take it for the first few questions from the chat, and then we'll go to the raised hands? I see Tanya. We'll come back to you in a minute.
Sure, sounds great. This is Carlin. We've got a couple of really good questions in here. I'll start off with an easy one, then go to a hard one. Regarding the 2015 Housing Production Plan, goal number 4 was to encourage preservation of smaller houses. What's the data, or what are the data about how many smaller houses were actually preserved since that goal was established? And maybe that's a Marcia question. I don't know. Do you have data like that?
We don't, unfortunately don't have data like that, because different I can tell you the number of tear downs, but I can't tell you the number of houses that have been preserved. We have approved projects where there are smaller homes, such as the Mill Run planned residential development. Those are smaller. That's right next to Concord Riverwalk, which is on Main Street near the Damon Mill. And we do continue to, whenever we're meeting with developers and we're talking about different types of housing where it is a special permit provision, we do encourage smaller size homes. So that the new piece, we're encouraging, but again, I don't have how many have been preserved or protected.
Okay, all right, well, let's try another one. I'm going to combine two here. The kind of the flip side of each other. One is, it would be nice to hear some analyses from the speakers as to why the two major projects failed. And the other part is, how can we attract more affordable housing projects for the Commonwealth land, formerly Junction Village? So what went wrong and what can we do better? Who wants to take that?
So what two projects are, I'm just knowing one major failure, and
Yeah,
that was Junction Village. In terms of promoting, I think the Concord Housing Development Corporation did an outstanding job of trying to promote development at that site. They received 12 different proposals that varied in different types of housing. The assisted living project was one of those 12. And it was through that community dialogue. They held several public meetings to explain what was being proposed and how it was going to be impacted. Concerns that were raised at the time had to do with the number of school-age children that might come into the system as part of family housing. That was a backlash from the Concord Muse development, the 350 units. It's now known as the Prescott, but that was 350 units on land at the intersection of the four communities, Concord, Acton, Maynard, and Sudbury. That was, and that project took 7 years to completion from this time that they first started. So it was the traffic was the other concern. So that's why the assisted living was believed to be the preferred development scenario. Why did it fail? Well, they needed more funding, and part of that had to do with supply chain issues. Materials have gone through the roof. Cost of construction has increased dramatically over the last 3 years since post-COVID. And we're seeing this across the board, where just the construction is out of control right now. And so, sitting back and waiting was not an option. The state has seen, I think they had 34 projects that need additional funding. And so this project would have had to go back to the state for those additional funds. And the state was saying, we will not consider additional funding unless the community provides additional funding. So it's, it was a catch-22.
Okay, that makes sense. Keith, do you happen to have an opinion on this? I kind of suspect you might.
Thanks for the invitation. I won't say everything that occurs to me, but I will say that it's unfortunate that I've been thinking a lot about how can we avoid a situation where where support of the Board of Selectmen is lost for the major project that a previous Board of Selectmen had identified to keep the community above its 10% goal under Chapter 40B. And I think that it may, because I'm very concerned about that going forward, that even if we're all in agreement about what the objectives of the next housing production plan should be, and I look forward to this Board of Selectmen supporting the measures that are in the plan that reflect the goals that they themselves have adopted to, to look at ways to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are important goals, and I really commend them for leading the way there. But what happens then if a future Board of Selectmen, or excuse me, Select Board? I worked for a Board of Selectmen for almost 40 years, and I sometimes lapse into calling it that. But the Select Board, future Select Board will need to find a way to make sure that every new board of the Select Board is as committed as the last one to whatever the major initiatives are we're working on to achieve affordable housing. Because if we're just going along doing what we think the plan is, and the political support is not there, we're not going to go anywhere. We can't move forward. It wasn't that we didn't have the additional $1 million that we needed for Christopher Heights at Junction Village in order to show the state that there were local funds that could be committed to, frankly, access an additional $7 million or so in state funding that the state was prepared to put on the table. So even if the total project cost had gone up from 20 to 28 million, 7 million was about to come from the state, and all we needed was 1 million from local funds. And the trust, my committee, voted to commit that $1 million in funds. So the funds weren't missing; they were there. What was not there, though, was the Select Board's support for going after the additional state funding. And they get to make that decision. They get to decide what the policy priorities are of the town. All they had to do was vote to support the funding request. The funds were already in place, but it's for the long-term goal of adding affordable housing. We can't have that disconnect between the political leadership and what the rest of the housing organizations are doing. We all have to be going in the same direction. And so that's why I'm really hoping that for anyone who's disappointed with what's happened here, just let's dive in together with the Select Board and the Planning Board on what do we want our plan of action to be in the housing production plan, and then just make a commitment to stay in touch with all of the players, including the Select Board and the Planning Board, as we go forward, because it does take years. These projects take years to make sure that we're in constant communication about how things are going, what progress is being made, and so that we can better address any concerns that folks have, because we're all in it together. Thanks.
Okay, Carlin, I'm going to take over for a second and just comment that the funding for Junction Village and the cost for the Christopher Heights project is not unlike the town's recent experience with schools. We had a high school construction project where we applied year after year to the state for assistance. Finally, we got some. We had a middle school project where we applied to the state for at least 3 years for assistance, and eventually we heard them when they said, no, Concord is not going to get assistance to build their new middle school. Finally, we heard them. It took us a while to hear that, but we moved forward, and the town is going to have to pay the entire cost of the middle school, whatever it is. And so housing projects, big ones, are not unlike that in that they take multiple years to get approved and to move forward with multiple funding sources. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And I think that's part of the message that we need to communicate to people who are not following this as closely as we are, how complicated and how much time it takes and how much time we lose when a project doesn't go forward. We have a couple of people with their hands raised. I'm going to go to Tanya since she was first in line. Tanya.
Hello, and sorry I can't be on camera. Thank you for the excellent presentations. There are two issues in town in general that are very close to my heart. One of them is a process in which everyone plays by the same rules, which is transparency, etc. The other one is protecting nature. And as far as nature goes, I want to make sure that DEI issues do not get pitted against preservation of nature, because people of color and visionaries who are people of color appreciate nature as a community building and unifying force. The other thing is about zoning nature that might infringe on the connectivity of trees and wildlife corridors, etc. So those are two small comments about nature. There is much more. About transparency, when it comes to the Junction Village project, I don't think money was the issue in the end. As Mr. Bergman indicated, the money was there. I think there were transparency issues with the project in 2017 and 2020. And therefore that ended up in some people and some select board members losing trust in the developer. And I think that, in all fairness, that should be put out there as well. And then I have a question for Marcia about the neighborhood preservation measures. I don't know exactly what that is about, and I would love to learn more about why there was resistance to that. It sounds like a good idea to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Marcia, do you want to comment on that?
I can. I gotta find my notes. Just give me a minute here. What did we call them? Neighborhood conservation districts, I think it was.
Yeah.
A neighborhood conservation district is a defined area. It's a neighborhood, and the process would be if somebody wanted to change their house, add on, expand, tear down, whatever, that a committee of neighbors from that area would weigh in and allow or disallow or modify the plans of that person. So and several of the neighborhoods where we've had these conversations have said, well, if it's something that you think is valuable for our neighborhood, why isn't it being applied across the town? So that's part of the reason why it hasn't gone forward. It has to come from the neighborhood. People have to want to be involved and participate and have this designation. And that's why it has not gone forward.
It's a little bit like a historic district, but not quite, or historic district light sort of situation. And I find that people who already live in the historic district like it. Full disclosure, I live in the historic district, and I like it. I don't want my neighbor painting their house purple, but I bristle when they tell me I can't paint my house yellow. So it's kind of a not in our yard situation. And people in the neighborhoods, I think it's fair to say, if you pick any given neighborhood, you will have a mix of people who are quite happy with the current status quo, and there are people who are maybe looking to sell their house and they figure they'll get more by selling it to a developer than they would if all you could do was expand the kitchen, but not level it and start over and double the sales price. So there is a financial, we have to be, money makes all of this work. We have to be honest about the financial incentives and the capitalist system that drives this. And there is a financial incentive to fewer rules and potentially making more money for the individual current landowner, not for society, but for the current landowners. With that editorial comment, I'll call on Terry since she has her hand raised, and then Carlin will go back to some questions from the chat. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm Terry Ackerman on the select board, but I'm speaking for myself. And I want to thank the previous two speakers for their honesty in bringing up these difficult issues. Keith, you are right. How can we avoid the loss of support by the select board? And we can't have that disconnect. We need to be all going in the same direction. We need constant communication. How are we going to do that in the future? So I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that the select board is going to be discussing this because we too see that as an issue. And we're going to be discussing that in the next few weeks. It is on our agenda. Also, Tanya identified there wasn't as much transparency with this project, and I think that relates to the constant communication and the disconnect. It's all those things are all related. Figure out how to solve that problem going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl, we have some more questions in the chat. I just wanted to address the question about the zoning for the MBTA's community zoning. And I know there were new regulations that came out recently amending the first round draft. And maybe Marcia, you could bring us up to date on the MBTA communities initiative.
I can to some extent. After, again, the planning board is gun shy after the failure of the thorough business district to pass. And that was not as dense as what the MBTA communities is proposing. So before they go forward with anything, they would like to have a conversation with the chair of the select board and the chair of the finance committee, because both of the finance committee was asking for a detailed analysis. Zoning only provides a framework for how something is developed. And it isn't until we receive a development proposal that we can actually put numbers to, I mean, we could put numbers to if we were to build out entirely, what would that look like? But that's an unrealistic assessment or an unrealistic analysis, because the developer would be looking at what is economic for them to create and what kinds of trade-offs would they have to make. So there's another step. By the end of January, there is a form that we can fill out that talks about how we will meet the different steps along the way for the MBTA communities. And then we would be looking at a 2024 annual town meeting if we were to bring it forward. So before the planning board undertakes that whole process, we've asked to have that meeting, and we're working to get that set up hopefully this month with the chair of the planning board, select board, and finance committee, and town staff to wrestle with that issue. How do we promote something that is going to be even more intensely developed or require more residences per acre than what was proposed for the thorough business district? Does that answer that question?
I believe that does. It's
Okay.
it's complicated. Who knew housing could be so complicated? Carlin, do you want to take another
Okay.
question? Then we'll come back to people
Sure.
raising their hands.
Let's follow along with the planning board. I can understand why they're gun shy. They put their heart and soul into that whole process, as did you, Marcia. That's my personal opinion. But with the planning board for this upcoming town meeting, not the special one, but the regular annual town meeting, are we going to see any planning board articles that deal with housing? Are we going to see anything from the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust regarding housing? Are we going to see any housing articles at the annual town meeting?
The only one that has been identified thus far from the planning board perspective is a revision of the combined business and residence district, or combined business residence bylaw, that allows this to happen by right. We want, the planning board wants to better define the requirement for affordable housing within that, that provision. It is a by right type of development is not a special permit in the business zones. But there are limited sites available for that. And so that you can look forward to at least one from the planning board. I don't know about the others. I do know that the CPC will have articles about affordable housing and funding and directing that funding.
In the annual town meeting for April. Got
Yes.
it. Okay, thanks. Back to you, Stefan.
Keith, you turned your camera on. Did you want to say something about municipal affordable housing in the April town meeting?
Sure. Thanks, Stefan. Yes, just we've been grateful for town meeting's annual support of funding for the trust in recent years, and we'll be back for another request this year. I'm glad to hear that if CPC would be a potential source of funding for the trust, and we're very happy to have the partnership that exists between all of the affordable housing entities. But we'll be back. Thanks.
Thank you. We've another go around. David Allen, you have your hand up and a question, I expect, or a comment. Go ahead.
A little bit of both. Thanks, Stefan. The 83 units at Junction Village, we might describe as the elephant in the room. Everything else pales by comparison when we look at the numbers. For two compelling reasons. Perhaps most important, that we might actually bring a dramatically large number of affordable units, but also there's 40B lurking in the background, and also not a small point at all. Let's say both positive pull and negative threat to the town. If I followed closely, and I don't know this as well as I might, certainly as some here, this stretches back a dozen years now, if I heard Marcia correctly, to 2010. If I also heard correctly, there were a dozen proposals at that time. If this is the elephant in the room, or the golden goose, or whatever it is we might call it, what are we doing to take advantage of the possibilities there? There are 11 other folks who proposed. It appears the wrong choice was made of the entity to handle the development, because they lost the trust of the select board, at least if that analysis is correct. Where's the focus? How are we going to move forward on something as important as this in the town of Concord? Thanks, Stefan.
I think that's a legitimate question. And Marcia, if you wanted to say something, I'll go to you first. And then if Liz Rust, who I see is on the call and who is also closely tied into the Concord Housing Development Corporation, which owns the land, the parcel we're talking about, perhaps she might want to add something too, but I'll offer you, Marcia, first crack at that.
Well, that was my point explicitly, is that the town doesn't own this land. It is the Concord Housing Development Housing Trust, and our Concord Housing Development Corporation. I'm sorry, and it is up to them. They are now focused on the Assabet River Bluff project and getting that underway. And then they're taking a step back because the political fallout from this may be that we won't get any proposals from housing groups interested in developing that property, knowing that there's this lack of support that occurred. And until we can quantify and identify what that is, we may not have any proposals. And what will the community accept? I mean, we went through a lengthy comprehensive permit process in getting the 83 units permitted. And so a developer coming in needs to know what is the subsidy, what is the town willing to support, what is possible, and to look at the various issues. A separate issue with that particular site is the need for on-site septic versus they are not on town sewer. So that infrastructure does not currently exist, and we don't know if there is even capacity for connecting to town sewer. So that's a constraint that somebody might see as an issue coming forward. So I'll be quiet about that, and then if Liz has more information, she may have more information, because she helps support the Concord Housing CHDC.
Yeah, hi. I think Marcia said everything. So hi, I'm Liz Rust. I help support the CHDC, and I think that's just exactly it. There's some real constraints with that property, in that it has to be 100% affordable. So it will always require a lot of subsidy. And part of that is a discussion of how many units would the town look for? Is it to solve the 40B problem and then it's higher subsidy for more units, or is it a smaller scale development? So it's really, I think, a combination of what's feasible and what are the town goals, and going forward in that process. And that would really not start probably till after the Assabet River Bluff project unfolds.
Which itself will take a number of years. It took, 2 years to get to the point of acquiring it, and action by the town meeting and the CPC and other housing supporting groups in town just to get the land. And now we're looking at probably another year plus to move forward with the existing building, and then probably another year or more beyond that to get to the point of actually digging for 3 more units on that site. And the bottom line of all of this is that no one can move in there until it's built and the certificate of occupancy is issued. And that means families are making do somewhere else, and it will be 4 years plus before they can move in there. And I think we need to all remember that too. I'm putting more editorial comment in here than moderators typically do, but maybe that's sharing my enthusiasm for the subject. I see.
It does take a long time, right, Stefan? As you mentioned, these projects take years and years, and especially if you have to go to town meeting more than one time, and you need to have the commitment of funds at town meeting before you can take the next step, because people want to know that you have the money in the bank. So it does take a while, and the Assabet River Bluff project will go through a public RFP process. So that's another step as well.
And not only do they want to know that you have the money in the bank, but it's a catch-22, because many funding sources, including banks, including the town, including town meeting, don't want to approve money until they see the final designs and they know everything that might possibly go wrong or how they might possibly be affected. And sometimes that's just not knowable until you get further down the process.
Right. I know the CGC was looking at maybe trying to accelerate the project and ask for funds in advance of having all the details worked out. But I think that you're right. In the end, people want more details than they were able to provide at this juncture.
Yes. Andy, Richard, you have had your hand up for a while.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate this. Thank you for the league for sponsoring this. It's great to have the opportunity to talk about affordable housing. I'm at Minuteman Arc working on development of housing for our community. So I was just going to ask about the Assabet River Bluff project. That's very exciting for our community too. And as it turns out, you and Liz answered my question. So thank you very much. Just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to talk about housing.
Thank you for that endorsement and appreciation, and hope to see you voting in town meeting when these issues come up again. Pamela.
We're guilty of
Hi.
we provided
Thank you.
intelligence and-
I agree. And also, I agree with what Tanya said about transparency. I don't think the select board would have voted the way they did had they actually known enough about the advantages and disadvantages of Christopher Heights. We need elder housing, particularly affordable elder housing.
I think we're just.
Regardless of whether it's affordable or not, we need that. And this would have provided it. It wouldn't have. So what are the ways that we can actually revive it? Is there a process?
Selling them weapons.
I know it's possible. Don't say, oh, it's over, it's gone. Bills come up in Congress year after year. You think you've killed something? It's not dead. Surely we could have a way of trying to revive Christopher Heights.
Logistics support for parts.
What would be the process?
Cut them off. You know, the planes would be on
there's- Oops.
I'll step in on that, Stefan. So
Okay.
Christopher Heights is the name that the private developer gave to the project. So the Christopher Heights is really related to the Grantham Group. And they have terminated their involvement with the project. As Marcia and as everyone has said before, the land remains and the land is owned by the CHDC and it will be repurposed under a different development name in the future. So I don't know that there's any interest by the developer to resurrect this particular project with that particular developer, with that particular project attributes, but there'll be something in the future.
Thank you. Carlin, looks like we're back to the questions in the chat.
Good. Just for a time check, it's 11:13. I've got two questions I want to pose here. They've been put in the question in the chat. One is about what other towns are doing. For example, the town of Acton recently received several $1 million from MassWorks infrastructure grant program and also a grant from the Housing Choice grant program. Does Concord qualify for this funding? Why or why not? That's the first question.
Okay. We do qualify for MassWorks. We have never applied for one. That would be through Concord Public Works. And we do not qualify as a housing choice community at this time, but could with certain, I don't recall all the provisions, but they may have adopted the 40R, which is the transit-oriented development for some of their locations, which would make them eligible for housing choice. We have not yet done that.
Got it. I'm going to do my own follow-up. Are we looking to do that?
The
Not at
housing
this time.
choice, I can just sort of say that the baseline requirement for housing choice is housing production. And so it's really tied to building permits, and Concord has not built enough housing to qualify for, there's other elements to it, but Concord hasn't built enough housing. So I think, you know, with some significant development could maybe meet that threshold. So that's on the housing choice.
Okay, and it's definitely, if I could follow up with one more question, then I'll turn it back to you if you wish. Let's talk about 40B, the pros and cons. We've been talking about it indirectly. It's being avoided because some neighborhoods will be affected, some not. Is it really harmful for the towns?
It depends on the developer. It is all about the developer. Trammell Crow Residential, who developed the 350 units for Concord Muse, was excellent to work with. They modified their plans along the way. They added some elements that we requested. They provided funding to Acton, to Sudbury, and to Concord to mitigate some of the impacts of that development, and we've taken advantage of that. We have certain developers who are a disaster, and they have been banned from applying for 40B projects. So it is all about the developer and who comes in and how we are able to work with them. Is a 40B project, it's a great tool for good developers. It's a terrible tool for bad developers. And you can't guarantee who you're going to get.
Okay, all right.
Keith?
Yeah, I'd just want to say, I agree with Marcia's assessment. Who the developer is key. The problem is that a so-called unfriendly 40B development means that it will be the developer's priorities rather than the town's for the project. And so the developer may choose a location and a density and a configuration that is not of the town's choosing. If we had a 40B development in Concord that was disconnected from transportation opportunities, that was not near village centers or was far away from employment, it's going to be, which often happens. I was town administrator in Littleton, and our 40B is at the Acton town line, as far away as it could possibly be from any other part of the community. And in fact, one of Acton's major 40Bs, the Avalon Acton, is on the Littleton town line, so they can look across the town border at each other. But having the housing production plan identify as we must, to my understanding, identify where we would want to see 40B developments to try to promote the attention of a good developer is, I think, will be an important strategy for us to include in this housing production plan. Thanks.
Okay, I have one more thing, if it's okay, Stefan.
Yep.
Aside from my personal observation that it sounds like affordable housing is going to be an issue for the upcoming town election, when will the Zoom link be posted for the November 15th forum? I've been trying to find it, Marcia, so we can put it on our notices.
Okay. We haven't posted it yet. I'm sorry, but we'll get that probably first thing Monday.
Okay, thanks. That's it. Go ahead, Stefan.
There is a fire engine going by, and so I got the train, I got the fire engine. All of this takes money and funding, and housing takes money and and time, and money and time, and we're running out of time this morning. Although I appreciate everyone participating, and I will turn things over to
We do one more.
Carlin.
One more
Yep.
really quick one. I just saw last week that actually kind of ties stuff. Could the Christopher Heights plot be a site for a 40B development?
It would depend on whether the Concord Housing Development Corporation would be willing to entertain a developer at that site for whatever 40B. Yeah, the Christopher Heights was a 40B. They went through that process. 40B overrides local zoning, so all bets are off. No setbacks are required. No density is looked at. Whatever is proposed is what we have to work with. And so it's a negotiation between the Zoning Board of Appeals and the developer, trying to work out the details of what that affordable housing development will look like. The challenge with 40B at the Christopher Heights plot is that that land has been sold and is limited, and it must be 100% affordable. And for most, like the 350 units at Concord Muse, only 25% were actually affordable. The other 75% are market rate, but they all counted. So that's the challenge that I think a 40B developer would have with that Christopher Heights property.
Thank you. That's it. Thanks, Stefan. Go back to you.
Thank you. And I will turn things over to Diane, since this is a first Friday. This is a league tradition, and Diane's subcommittee is the first Friday sponsor. She gets the closing comments as well. Thank you. Diane?
Stefan, thank you for a really informative and extraordinarily helpful conversation. Marcia, Keith, Liz, And Stefan, your commentary, and Carlin, for the beautiful way you manage the chat box. This has been, for all of us in our community, a very helpful discussion. So thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this discussion, if you've enjoyed other First Fridays, please join the League. Go to the League website, join. It gives us the resources we need to be able to support this kind of program and to bring other important speakers to our community. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. May affordable housing be something that the entire community of Concord embraces as we move forward. Thank you so much.